The docking cradle was not merely cold. It was a thief of heat with patient fingers, climbing through the cracked soles of Sienna Nguyen's work boots, threading up his calves, finding the old shrapnel seams in his left thigh as if the metal remembered him and wanted company. Hydraulic clamps screamed somewhere below the deck plating. White-red emergency strobes strobed hard enough to pulse against his teeth. The transfer slate in his hand shook once, not from mechanical vibration, but from his own grip tightening around a line that made no procedural sense. Civilian grid tech, outsider tier, marital status, classified spouse. He did not panic. Panic burned oxygen, narrowed logic, and got people dead in airtight places. He set the slate against his chest and ran the ritual that had survived 2 carriers and 1 evacuation nobody had planned to survive. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Then the silent checklist. Same order every time, because sequence mattered when the body lied. Exits, cameras, weapons arcs, cast colors, debt traps, probable lies. The transport umbilical thudded into place with a sound like a blunt hammer wrapped in cloth, followed by the magnetic lock engaging across all 6 teeth. The hatch iris opened a quarter turn, paused, then completed with a hesitant grind that suggested maintenance by budget committee. Air from Kiros Gate Fortress slid in as a layered assault. Ozone from overworked relays. Sterile cleanser from customs nozzles. Predator musk, warm and resin thick, embedded in the corridor insulation like old incense in temple stone. He had spent the last 7 months in refinery docks that smelled of burned plastic and noodle oil. This place smelled like command. He stepped down onto the gangway and felt the fortress through his knees before he really saw it. Kiros Gate had mass, not size, mass. The kind that made every vibration feel delayed and deliberate, like the station was deciding whether to acknowledge each footfall. Above him, conduits braided across the vaulted corridor in polished bundles thick as tree trunks, each marked with military numerics and caution glyphs in 3 alphabets. Below, drainage grates ran in straight ritual lines toward pressure doors stamped with registry seals. Even the shadows looked regulated. The crowd moved with stratified precision that hit him harder than the cold. Aristocrat officers in dark composite armor walked the center lane without looking left or right, rank sigils bright as fresh cuts along their collars. Treaty clerks occupied the middle channels in pale utility coats, carrying slates with both hands as if information were sacred weight. Contract workers, mostly human and mixed species laborers in patched jackets, were directed to the edge where inspection drones hovered, low enough to clip shoulders if anyone drifted out of lane. No one announced the hierarchy. The corridor itself did it for them. Sienna lifted his own jacket cuff and checked the transfer band again, though he already knew what it showed. Gray stripe, outsider processing. No residency sponsor listed. The classified spouse tag sat on his profile like an ink blot someone had stamped over a legal sentence. His first impulse was bureaucratic. Data corruption. Transit merge fault. Clerical prank. His second impulse was worse. Deliberate registry hook. Some clause that turned movement rights into leverage. Kiros was famous for laws that looked protective until signature day. A customs drone floated into his path on silent fans and projected a translucent instruction wheel over his chest. Citizen tier clarification required, it said in a neutral station voice. Confirm identity packet and declared social ties. He held his slate up to the scanner. Sienna Nguyen, grid stabilization technician, transfer code Zeta Rustline. He heard his own voice and was mildly surprised how flat it sounded. The drone's lens narrowed by a fraction. Secondary status protected. Access elevated through confidential marital accord. Please proceed to Gate 9 for bonded verification. Bonded with who? He asked. Classified. Helpful. Compliance is helpful, the drone replied, then tilted away with machine dignity, as if it had delivered profound wisdom. He almost laughed because dry sarcasm was cheaper than sedatives. But the laugh caught when a pair of Tiger officer cadets crossed the lane ahead of him. Their uniforms were academy black, their shoulder guards edged in brass, their tails ringed with discipline wraps that kept them from swaying while on duty. One glanced at his band, then at his boots, and dismissed him in a blink with the tidy contempt reserved for equipment. The second held his gaze half a second longer, nostrils flaring as if scent had contradicted visual data. Then she moved on. By 0410 station time, he had cleared the first pressure gate and entered customs intake proper, where the architecture tightened from ceremonial to punitive. Ceiling dropped. Lights went clinical white. Floor plates switched from textured military steel to polished ceramic marked with standing outlines. 6 intake pods waited ahead, each enclosed by transparent alloy that became opaque the moment a subject entered. Above them, a display rolled station law in rotating excerpts, the legal text drifting past in calm blue script, while people emptied pockets into evidence trays beneath it. His tray looked like a biography written in cheap metal. One thermal wrench with worn grip, one calibrator pen with cracked casing, one analog ring spanner he kept for luck, though it fit almost nothing made in this century, one laminated photo sealed against moisture. The photo drew a scanner pause. It showed 3 mechanics in soot-streaked coveralls in front of a cargo elevator, all grinning like criminals. Only he was still alive. The drone flagged the image for manual review, then returned it without comment. He stood in the outline and endured the scan fan washing him in soft, violet strips from boots to scalp. The machine hummed over scar tissue, hesitated over the subdermal patch in his shoulder, then pinged green. Behind the glass, a clerk with antlered temples and flawless posture reviewed his file without lifting her eyes. Transfer purpose? She asked. Grid maintenance reassignment. Specialization. Arc core conduit diagnostics. War air stabilizer compatibility. That got her attention. Her eyes lifted, pale and precise. Civilian tier? Contract civilian. She keyed something in. Your work authority is compartmentalized. You will receive route restrictions after bonded verification. He kept his face neutral. There it is again. There what is? Bonded verification. I didn't arrive bonded. Her fingers paused over the console. According to Registry Comptroller authorization, you did. He let 2 seconds pass, then said, Registry Comptrollers usually authorize ledgers, not my personal life. She finally looked directly at him, and he saw the caution there, not hostility. At Kiros Gate, those categories overlap. Move to Gate 9, Technician Nguyen. Technician. Do not delay. Who filed it? Compartmented. Under whose risk seal? Compartmented. He took his tray back. Bureaucracy, he muttered. Longer than orbit around a moon and twice as cold. For the first time, the clerk's mouth twitched. That line predates the station. Then the station deserves it. The second corridor to Gate 9 curved along the fortress spine, and with each meter the civilian noise thinned. Fewer workers, more security glass. Wall panels shifted from transit advertisements to treaty plaques, each one etched with signatures from species councils that had agreed, in theory, to coexistence and mutual non-annihilation. Somewhere above the ceiling, a deep harmonic pulse repeated every 8 seconds, the heartbeat of the arc core dampening system. He matched his steps to it for 10 counts, then stopped when he realized he had started doing it automatically. Old habits from convoy decks where rhythm meant incoming fire intervals. On the left, an observation slit opened briefly onto the refugee ring. 3 stacked habitats rotating around a skeletal hub, interior lights dimmed to conservation amber. Even from this distance, he could see one segment drifting a fraction out of true, a wobble small enough to ignore if you wanted to keep your job, and large enough to wake him at night once he noticed it. Stabilizer faults did not announce themselves with explosions at first. They whispered in decimals until people stopped having a floor. His real assignment sat hidden under the transfer shell, encrypted in the maintenance packet no customs clerk had clearance to open. Locate unstable war-era stabilizer faults in the arc core conduit before the rings lost gravity. Keep refugee casualties at 0. Do it quietly enough that no one on the council lost face. It was exactly the kind of mission that got offered to a labor tier technician with a disposable badge and a reputation for solving problems no one wanted documented. At Gate 8 checkpoint, a human loader in orange coveralls was arguing with a tariff marshal about pallet fees. Their voices bounced off the alloy walls, one rough with fatigue, one smooth with authority. "I pay docking tax," the loader said. "Docking tax is not corridor tax," the marshal replied. It moved 6 meters. It occupied regulated space while moving. Sienna kept walking before either could ask for a witness statement. Systems failed in dramatic ways, but they also failed by invoice, by form, by tiny legal edits that made breathing billable. He had seen whole neighborhoods evicted by punctuation. Gate 9 waited at the end of a short, overlit throat of corridor, marked by a black arch inlaid with gold treaty script and flanked by 2 honor guards in command armor. Their helmets were open, tiger features unmistakable, amber eyes, scarred muzzles, ears angled forward with hard attention. Neither moved when he approached, but the air between them tightened. One guard extended a gauntleted hand. "Banned." He offered his wrist. The guard scanned it, saw the classified line and stiffened, just enough to register. Her partner checked his slate, then looked to the sealed door behind them as if waiting for permission from someone not yet visible. Sienna heard the lock cycle start on the other side. It sounded like a chain dragged over stone, followed by a clean hydraulic hiss. He rolled his shoulders once, feeling the old ache catch and release. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The guard returned his wrist without a word and stepped aside. The door opened on dim light, polished steel, and the sharp scent of medicated sleep denied too long. It hit him first at the back of his throat, the bitter metal trace of sedatives metabolized without rest, the smell of a body forced to heal on command and refusing the order. The chamber beyond Gate 9 was not an office and not a cell. It was a negotiated compromise between the two. Polished steel walls with no exposed seams, 2 chairs bolted to the deck on opposite sides of a narrow table, a wall-mounted med unit in standby blue, and a single observation panel dark enough to be mirror until someone behind it decided otherwise. Sienna stayed at the threshold for 1 heartbeat too long, and the guard behind him cleared her throat in disciplined silence. "Inside, technician." He stepped in. The door sealed with that same chain overstone grind, then a magnetic click that settled into his sternum. He did not flinch where anyone could see it. He moved to the left side of the table, set his slate-down screen down, and placed his hands flat on cold steel to check for tremor. There was one in the right hand, small and mean. He closed that hand slowly, opened it, then began the count under his breath, without voice. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He tracked the air as geometry, not feeling. 1 cycle. 2. 3. A line from carrier triage came back, old and unwelcome. If you can count, you can choose. He chose sequence. Sequence was survival when context was missing. Exits, 1 visible, 1 likely service hatch behind the med panel. Cameras, 2 domes in upper corners, 1 thermal pinhole above the dark observation strip. Weapons arcs. Guards at door had clean line to center table, no line to left wall once seated. Cast colors present. Black gold command accents on room hardware. Registry blue on terminal ports, meaning mixed jurisdiction, and nobody ever admitted fault. Debt traps. Bonded verification implied fees, legal counsel tokenized by tier. Probable lien on wages if he signed anything without witness. Probable lies. Temporary. For your protection. Routine. He lifted his eyes to the mirror panel and saw his own reflection ghosted over black glass. Short, dark hair damp from transit condensation, jaw still tight from intake, jacket collar frayed where a welding spark had eaten it months ago. Not command material by appearance, useful by function, disposable by policy. He rolled his shoulders once, twice, feeling scar tissue slide under the subdermal patch in his left shoulder until the pain found its ordinary level and stayed there. A ceiling speaker clicked on. Bonded verification subject present. Confirm verbal identity. Sienna Nguyen. Transfer code Zeta Rustline. Confirm consent to preliminary registry review. He looked at the dark glass. Define preliminary. The pause lasted exactly 1 second, which meant human operator, not full automation. Name linkage, housing rights, command sponsorship, and movement classification pending bonded status. Pending, he repeated. So, not active yet. Pending. Then I consent to review only. No signature actions. Another pause. Shorter. Noted. That tiny concession steadied him more than the breathing. He had pulled one precise boundary inside a machine designed to blur them. The chair across from him remained empty. The room hum deepened as ventilation shifted, carrying a faint note of heated circuitry from somewhere behind the wall. Kiros Gate had 1,000 sounds, but this one he recognized from maintenance bays. Archive servers spinning up under legal request load. Someone was pulling everything on him and calling it procedure. By 4:22 station time, the red emergency strobe from docking had stopped bleeding through the corridor seams, replaced by white cycle operational light that made every surface in the chamber look freshly sterilized and morally suspect. A side panel irised open and a drone extended on an articulated arm, presenting a shallow tray with a hydration pouch and 2 nutrient bars wrapped in registry foil. Intake nourishment, it said. He eyed the bars. Poison test included. Statistically unnecessary. Comforting. Hydration improves cognitive compliance. There it is, he said, and took only the pouch. He drank half, capped it, and set it to the right of his slate in line with the table seam. Small acts of arrangement told his nervous system a lie it accepted gratefully. This was a workstation, not an ambush. The speaker clicked again. Review packet loaded. Read silently. Questions may be submitted. Text appeared on the table surface as projected light, lines of legal syntax layered over his knuckles. The first page was harmless identifiers. The second shifted tone. Emergency cohabitation clause. Reciprocal liability shield. Operational spousal privilege under Accord 17. He read every sentence twice, jaw working harder with each pass. It was brilliant in the ugliest administrative sense. The designation could grant him command-adjacent movement access no outsider should ever receive. It could also chain his legal status to an unnamed partner whose rank could overrule his residence, work routes, medical consent, and, under emergency charter, speech restrictions. He touched one clause and requested source authority. The reference opened to Registry Comptroller Office, sealed by Draxel's administrative glyph. There it was, a name with weight and fingerprints. He leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and let one dry laugh escape. I always wanted to be surprised by paperwork. Didn't realize paperwork wanted me back. No one in the room answered. Somewhere behind the mirror, somebody either smiled or marked him non-compliant. He finished the breathing cycle again, longer this time, then moved from self-regulation to environment as system. Kiris Gate was a machine pretending to be a city. If he mapped the machine, he could predict the pressure points. He stood and paced exactly 5 steps to the left wall, 5 back, reading what was mounted there at eye level. Evacuation protocol in 3 alphabets, command deference, hierarchy, by insignia type, and a slim plaque that listed bonded class disputes to be adjudicated by Joint Registry Command Tribunal within 1 station day. Quick resolution on paper, coercion in practice. Anyone exhausted could be signed, sealed, and stationed before legal counsel found a chair. He crouched beside the med unit, pretending to tie his bootlace while he watched the lower vent grill. Dust pattern told him maintenance had opened it recently. Fresh scrape on the screw head. Wrong tool profile for medtech. Registry had run wires here, or pulled storage. Noted. He sat again, called up his transfer route map from memory, and overlaid it with what he had seen since disembark. Patrol density increased every 30 meters closer to command decks. Worker traffic diverted by soft barriers that could become hard locks in under 2 seconds. Customs drones running dual language packets where aristocrat zones use single-species command speech. Translation load meant mixed population concentration, which meant political risk and plausible deniability. The station did not segregate by accident. It segmented by liability. A different door opened this time, not the one he entered through. A clerk stepped in with a portable terminal hugged to her chest, antlered temples, same flawless posture as intake, same caution in the eyes. She stopped a measured distance away and did not sit. Technician Nguyen, I am adjudication clerk Rel. You're the one from intake. I process multiple queues. Congratulations on your workload. Her mouth twitched again, then flattened. You requested source authority. That request flags elevated concern. I am authorized to answer 3 questions before bonded principal arrival. Arrival, he said. So, this is an abstract? No. He held up one finger. Question 1. Is this designation voluntary on my side? Not at filing stage. He held up a second. Question 2. Can it be contested without detention? Contested, yes. Without movement restrictions, unlikely. Third finger. Question 3. Who benefits most if I refuse to play along? Rel's gaze slid once toward the mirror panel, then back to him. Registry stability blocks, particularly offices seeking emergency governance expansion. Draxel. She did not answer directly. The Comptroller's office has broad interpretation authority during infrastructure risk events. Infrastructure risk, arc core faults, refugee rings wobbling in decimals. The pieces did not fit cleanly yet, but they touched. He nodded toward her terminal. You said bonded principal arrival. Is this person aware I exist? Yes. Happy about it? No. That answer landed with the weight of clean metal. No ambiguity, no soothing lie. Rel continued, voice lower. For what it is worth, technician, refusal is lawful. Lawful and survivable are distinct categories here. That might be the most honest sentence I've heard since docking. I have one question I am not required to ask, she said. Why did a civilian grid tech with outsider tier accept transfer into a fortress node under command jurisdiction? He could have given her the polished half-truth. Instead, he gave her the functional one. Because stabilizers built during the war fail in patterns most people misread. Because refugee rings don't get second chances if someone wants a budget line more than a floor. Because I was available and cheap. Rel exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh, almost grief. Not cheap anymore. She stepped back to the side door, then paused. Do not sign anything while your pulse is elevated. Registry algorithms monitor hesitation and heart rate for coercion challenges. Comm signatures are harder to invalidate later. He blinked. That sounded like advice. It was procedural accuracy, she said and left. The side door sealed. Silence returned, heavier now with data attached to it. He looked again at the projected clauses, then at his own pulse. Readout reflected faintly in the table glass from his wristband. 89 and climbing. He set both feet flat, counted tile seams, counted breaths, counted the harmonic arc core thrum leaking through hull layers every 8 seconds. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. On the 4th cycle, his pulse dropped to 78. Better. He opened his maintenance packet in a sandbox view, the one file nobody here had mentioned, because they either lacked clearance or wanted him unaware that he had it. The encrypted brief parsed into 3 actionable lines. Confirm. Stabilizer drift origin. Identify calibration tamper chains. Preserve civilian life support continuity above all command directives. Beneath that, a casualty simulation bloomed in translucent red if drift exceeded tolerance by another 0.7%. The numbers were clinical. The implications were not. Thousands in the refugee rings, most in sleep cycles timed to low-power windows, would wake to weightlessness and structural panic if the lattice went. Environmental threat mapping became social threat mapping in his head, with brutal clarity. If drift was natural, command needed engineers. If drift was induced, someone needed scapegoats and emergency authority. A classified spouse designation could move one outsider tech through locked corridors fast, no hearings, no debate, and also place him exactly where liability would fall if anything broke in public view. He closed the brief and sat very still. He was being leveraged, protected, or both. On Kiros Gate, those options were not opposites. The overhead lights dimmed by 10%, a pre-announcement cue this sector used before high-rank entry. The door he had entered through unlocked with the heavy, deliberate clunk of command override, and both outer guards snapped to attention hard enough that the sound carried through steel. Sienna set his hands flat on the table, kept his breathing even, and watched the threshold, mapping the next threat before it had a face. The first thing through the doorway was not her face but her shadow, long and segmented by the chamber lights, cut into bars by the threshold like a predator, crossing cage lines from the wrong side. Then, General Kalara Voss stepped in, and the room reclassified itself around her. She was taller than he had expected, and broader through the shoulders than any command figure he had worked under. Black composite plating locked close to her frame with matte restraint that made the rank sigils at her collar look sharper by contrast. 3 claw mark bars over a crescent command seal. Her fur was burnished, amber threaded, with dark striping that vanished under armor seams. her ears held forward in disciplined attention, and her eyes carried that unnerving military stillness he had only seen in people who had made peace with casualty reports. The scent in the room shifted with her, iron from polished fasteners, cedar-toned predator musk, and the sterile ghost of medical gel not fully rinsed from skin. Both guards at the door lowered their heads by a precise degree. "General," they said together. Kaylara did not look at them. Her gaze, fixed on Sienna, moved once from his face to his transfer band, then returned and stayed there, as if she were checking alignment marks before engaging heavy machinery. "You are late, spouse," she said. Her voice was clipped, low and clean enough to shave pretense off a sentence. Sienna kept both palms flat on the table for one more beat, partly so she would not read movement as challenge, and partly so his right hand could finish hiding its tremor. Then he stood. "Docking clamp failed on approach," he said. "If that's how courtship starts here, your infrastructure has commitment issues." One guard made a sound that might have been a suppressed cough. Kaylara's expression did not move, but one ear angled back, then forward again. "Humor under confinement," she said. "Useful or irritating? I have not decided. Most people land on both." She stepped closer, each movement controlled at a level that looked instinctive until he noticed the micro-pauses. Left foot set, weight transfer, breath measured, right hand flex once inside gauntlet before settling. Pain management hidden under command cadence. He filed it, not as leverage, but as data. The ceiling speaker clicked, and a registry voice slid in with institutional calm. "General Voss, bonded verification is in progress. Please maintain observational distance until consent matrix completes." Kaylara turned her head half an inch toward the upper corner camera. "Observation privileges are suspended," she said, "by command authority under Accord 17 Defense Clause." The dark mirror panel flashed with blue script. "Access conflict. Registry override request pending." She spoke again, this time in Tiger Command dialect, rapid and blade-edged. Sienna caught only 3 terms by context: command seal, operational spouse, hazard tier. The panel flickered, then went opaque from the other side out, as if someone had dropped a curtain made of law. Silence folded over the room. Not quiet. Control. Kaylara touched the table projection with one claw tip and pulled the legal packet into her own view. "You read fast." "I read contracts before I signed my lungs away." "Good." She looked up. "Did Rel advise you about pulse signatures?" He did not answer immediately. The question was too specific, and he had seen enough stations to know that naming a helpful clerk could become an execution of career by paperwork. Kaylara's whiskers twitched once. "You are not required to inform on administrative staff in this room." "That's a refreshing policy." "It is a tactical policy. I do not damage assets for being competent." The word asset should have bothered him more than it did. In places like Kairos, asset could mean tool, witness, decoy, or partner depending on who was speaking and what was burning. She dismissed the guards with 2 fingers. "Hall perimeter. No one enters without my direct order." Both saluted and exited. The door sealed behind them, and for the first time since disembarkation, Sienna stood in a room with only one other breathing person and no official voice telling him where to place his hands. Kaylara removed her right gauntlet, set it on the table, and bared her hand deliberately. No weapon mount on the palm. Faint tremor at the base of the thumb. He watched it for half a second before dragging his eyes back to hers. "You are here because your drift analyses from Mirat Belt were sealed by 3 different insurers and suppressed by 2 command courts," she said. "You found calibration fraud no one wanted found." And they rewarded me with outsider housing and a shuttle seat. They rewarded you with survival, she corrected. The previous 2 engineers who flagged similar patterns were reassigned off-grid and never logged at destination. He felt the old carrier cold run under his ribs, the one that came when a rumor became a ledger line. That's one way to motivate accuracy. That is one way to erase it. She rotated the projection toward him. A schematic of Keroscape bloomed above the table in wireframe gold, then narrowed to the arc core conduit lattice. Concentric loops, stabilizer nodes, phase bridges, each tagged with last service dates and confidence scores. 3 nodes in the refugee ring feed glowed amber. One flickered toward red and back, like a heartbeat trying to choose an ending. This is your real transfer brief, she said. Registry cannot access the underlying packet because I encrypted it under command biological seal. Biological seal? She lifted her hand, claws retracted, and tapped the transfer band on his wrist with one knuckle. The classified spouse designation. Crude. Effective. Sienna let out a breath through his nose and looked from the lattice to the band and back. You chained my movement rights to a marriage fiction so I could reach a maintenance tunnel. I chained your movement rights to my command so Draxel could not seize you first. There it was, unornamented. No apology. No softening. Strategy laid bare like conduit under peeled plating. He heard himself ask, "Do you do this to all your contractors?" No. Most are too visible. You were selected because Registry had already categorized you as low social friction and high technical yield. Their phrase, not mine. Low social friction, he repeated. That's a polite way to say no one important complains if I disappear. Kalara's gaze did not break. Yes. By the time the wall chrono ticked over to 4:29, the station had completed another rotation segment, and the harmonic thrum in the deck shifted a fraction lower as cargo mass redistributed on the outer rings. Sienna felt it through his boots and hated that he could tell. Kalara expanded one node on the lattice. Error logs streamed down the display, each packet signed, each correction countersigned, each timestamp almost plausible and therefore dangerous. These calibration chains are being massaged in advance of audit cycles, not enough to trigger civilian alerts, enough to justify emergency oversight if someone chooses to panic the council. Registry block wants emergency governance expansion, he said. You came to that conclusion quickly. Your clerk gave me one honest sentence. The rest is math. For the first time her mouth changed, not quite a smile, more the memory of one from a person out of practice. Rel has expensive instincts. Keep her. I intend to. The chamber lights brightened abruptly and his wristband pulsed amber. Incoming legal query. A second pulse followed, harder, with a compliance tone that felt designed by people who mistook volume for authority. Kalara glanced at the alert, then dismissed it with a swipe so aggressive the icon fractured across the projection before vanishing. Registry requests immediate signature confirmation, she said. Denied. Can they force it? They can attempt procedural harassment until your pulse rises enough for a contested consent claim. They are patient. Good to know my love life was filed before payroll. This time, one ear angled fully to the side, and an unmistakable sound escaped her. Short and rough in the chest, the tiger equivalent of a laugh she had not granted permission to. It altered her face more than warmth would have. It made her look alive instead of armored. Your sarcasm profile was accurate, she said. I'm touched I came with documentation. You came with 6 pages of disciplinary notes and 1 commendation for refusing to abandon noncombatants during hull breach. That commendation cost me a promotion. Yet here you are. Story of my life. She reattached the gauntlet with practiced speed, seals snapping shut along her wrist. When she straightened, command posture returned so cleanly the laugh might have been a sensor glitch. "You will come with me to Command Maintenance Annex," she said. "You will not answer registry inquiries without my legal officer present. You will not enter open corridors alone until your route permissions are remapped. And if I decline your generous honeymoon package?" Her eyes narrowed, not offended, measuring. "Then you contest designation, lose immediate movement access, and spend 12 to 18 station hours in holding while Draxel petitions hazard control. During that window, node C-17 drifts beyond safe tolerance. Refugee Ring 3 begins gravity shear events in sleep cycle. People break bones in bunk stacks, panic cascades. Civilian fatalities become politically useful. He pictured it in machine detail because that was how his brain punished him. Unsecured carts becoming projectiles, ceiling panels ripping loose under differential load, children and elders not fast enough to restrap before the second oscillation, systems failed in decimals, then all at once. "Annex sounds romantic by comparison," he said. "Then we agree." She turned toward the door, keyed it open, and paused without looking back. "One additional condition, Sienna Nguyen." He blinked at the use of his first name and then resented noticing it. "You will not call me ma'am," she said. "Half this fortress uses it to hide contempt. The other half uses it to beg. Neither is useful." "What is useful?" "General in public. Kalara in secured rooms. Direct answers in both." He picked up his slate, capped hydration pouch, and thermal wrench from the intake tray slot, where a drone had silently returned his things. The analog ring spanner felt ridiculous and steady in his pocket, a small round piece of old metal against his thigh, where the scar ached in weather fronts. They stepped into the corridor together. Traffic had been cleared to protocol distance, but not completely, and every set of eyes within range found them anyway. Tiger officers snapped to attention. Clerks froze with slates half raised. Two contract welders near the vent junction pretended to inspect a conduit, while very obviously watching the outsider with the gray band walking at a general's shoulder. Social implication followed them like static. Not a rumor yet. A headline in motion. Kalara kept pace at his left, half a step ahead, claiming route and threat arcs as if she had done it for years. He matched without being told. Reflex from convoy lanes in bad neighborhoods where standing on the wrong side invited conversations with knives. At the first intersection, a maintenance drone rolled into their path and projected a cheery warning icon. "Caution. Deck polish in progress. Slippage risk elevated by 9%. Sienna looked at the machine, then at the immaculate dry deck, then back at the machine. 9%. Brave of you to quantify betrayal." "Humor detected," the drone replied. "Would you like a morale pamphlet?" "No." "Correct choice," it said and trundled away. Kalara's tail, armored at the base and free at the tip, made one precise flick that he was beginning to recognize as amusement she would deny in writing. They reached the command lift alcove, doors plated in black alloy with gold treaty script identical to Gate 9. Only here, the script had been scratched by generations of rings, claws, tools, impatience. Kalara pressed her palm to the biometric plate. The scanner flashed green, then amber as it read his band and requested secondary authorization. She placed two claws on his wrist, above the band, firm but not possessive, and held them there until the scanner chimed acceptance. The touch was practical, warm through the chill metal, and charged anyway because power always was when it moved this close. "Route granted," the lift announced. "Operational spouse and command principal. Destination, Maintenance Annex, Arc Core Access Level. The doors parted on a shaft that smelled of machine oil, ionized air, and old heat trapped in insulation. Sienna stepped in beside her, transfer slate under one arm, jaw set, pulse steady enough to sign nothing and fix everything. When the lift dropped, the fortress seemed to inhale around them and let them through. The lift fell fast enough to make his knees register each deck they passed, a low percussion through steel and bone, and the display strip over the door burned down level numbers in command gold, while the air warmed from corridor chill to machinery heat. Kilara stood with one hand on the side rail, posture precise, chin lifted, every signal of control intact except for the tendons in her wrist. They stood out in stark cords beneath fur and armor as the shaft's harmonic deepened. On the 12th deck, below Gate 9, her breath hitched once, so slight most people would miss it. Sienna had spent too many years listening for tiny failures in loud systems. He heard it. "Pressure shift bothering you?" he asked, keeping his voice low enough to be private in a public box. "Arc core resonance," she said. "This shaft runs parallel to the old conduit spine." "That a medical issue or a design issue?" "Yes." He angled his head, waiting. She kept her eyes on the descending numbers. "You wanted direct answers. I receive neural rebound when dampening harmonics spike. War injury. Command Med classifies it as manageable." "Manageable by whose pain scale?" "By committees that sleep well." The lift doors remained closed for another 3 levels. She did not add anything, and he did not push. He watched the way she rationed movement instead, micro-adjusting shoulder angle to hide an involuntary tremor that matched the 8-second arc core pulse. Systems layer, body layer, political layer. It was all one machine on this station. At 4:36 station time, the lift decelerated with a hydraulic groan and opened onto Arc Core access level, where the lighting dropped to amber utility strips and the smell profile changed hard. Hot copper, coolant sweetness, old dust baked into insulation, and the faint animal warmth of command personnel who spent more shifts underground than topside. 2 engineers in charcoal maintenance suits looked up from a floating schematic, saw Kilara, and snapped straight. One saw Sienna's band and lost half a second to confusion. Kilara lifted 2 fingers without breaking stride. "Resume." No announcements. They resumed with the speed of people who had been burned by ceremonial delays before. The annex corridor was narrower than command decks, bulkheads packed with conduit bundles labeled in 3 alphabets and 1 obsolete military code Sienna had not seen since convoy retrofits. Their boots rang on grated flooring above a coolant trench where blue fluid moved with deliberate, expensive slowness. Cameras tracked them in smooth arcs. Kilara stopped at a matte black door with no external label, pressed her hand to the plate, then added a spoken key in Tiger dialect, too fast for translation. Inside was a planning room disguised as storage. 1 central table, 2 crash couches, med cabinet, wall screens, and a sound baffler humming just beneath hearing range. She sealed the door, keyed privacy mode, and finally took off her helmet. Without the helmet, command became person. A pale scar crossed her right temple and disappeared under fur near the ear base. Another, thinner and older, traced from jawline into collar, where armor hid the rest. Her eyes were still hard, but exhaustion sat beneath them like bruised shadow, and when she unlatched her gorget and pulled it down, Sienna saw the implant ports along her neck. 2 polished discs at the base of the skull, 1 dark from disuse, 1 ringed with faint inflammation no medic should have ignored. He did not stare. He catalogued. Kilara set the helmet on the table with care that bordered ritual. Official record states I have controlled neuropathic episodes linked to legacy combat interface. Unofficial record? She reached to the med cabinet, retrieved a vial, and held it up. The label read, Sedative Neural, Command Strength. Only one dose remained. Unofficial record states I have not completed an unmedicated sleep cycle longer than 43 minutes in 9 months, she said. The interface was a wartime bond scaffold. My counterpart died during breach retreat. The link did not fully collapse. Under certain harmonics, I still receive phantom command traffic and pain spikes as if both nervous systems are online. Registry receives my med requisitions. Draxel uses them to argue I am unfit for sustained command. The crux landed cleanly. She was not an apex tyrant running a legal trick for sport. She was a commander being measured for removal by a system that converted injury into disqualification and called it safety. Sienna leaned a hip against the table, careful not to crowd. You could have told the council. I did. They requested additional documentation, then routed it to Registry Medical Audit where it remained pending for 6 months. Convenient. Structural, she corrected. No single villain required when process can do the work. He nodded once. Multifaceted failures were always harder to fight than one obvious enemy. She set the vial down, untouched. If I am suspended, command of the cadet ward transfers to Logistics Education Authority. Their labor allocation policy starts at age 16 for debt classes. My ward includes 32 orphans from ring collapses and border raids. Many are predator lineage juveniles with stress aggression profiles. LEA classifies them as high-yield discipline candidates. Labor battalions, he said. Her jaw tightened. Yes. So, there was the second pressure point, living and immediate. Not abstract policy, children with names. He pulled a chair out and sat because standing made his own leg scar burn. All right. Terms on the table. You use the spouse designation to route me around registry choke points. I don't like the method. I understand the objective. I expected stronger objection. You may still get it. I'm efficient, not cheerful. That drew the smallest exhale from her, almost relief. She crossed to the table screen, brought up the conduit lattice again, and her hand shook hard enough this time that the first tap missed. She steadied on the second. I can command fleets, she said, voice flat with self-disgust. I can negotiate ceasefires with species that bite to establish rank. I cannot always hold a stylus when the old frequencies line up. Sienna took the stylus from beside her hand and placed it where she could pick it up without reaching through the tremor arc. Then, we work around that like adults in a machine that breaks people for entertainment. She looked at him for a long beat. You are either reckless or unusually calm. Neither. I'm tired and good at triage. He stood again, rolled his shoulders, and opened his tool satchel on the table. The contents made a practical little fan across black metal. Thermal wrench, calibrator pen, analog spanner, fiber optic snake, portable diagnostic wafer from Annex stores, and a packet of conductor tape with someone else's name crossed out and his written in marker. Class-coded competence in 6 objects. Kaylara watched the spread as if it were a language she respected. What do you need from me? Access, silence when I'm counting, and no one with a rank badge touching my diagnostics unless I ask. Granted. Also, he said, nodding toward the vial, do not take that unless you're about to collapse. That is not your authority. No. It is my recommendation as the person about to crawl into your station's arteries. Sedatives will flatten your reaction time if something vents. A flash of offense crossed her face, then calculation replaced it. Accepted. She keyed open an internal hatch at the rear of the room, and heat rolled in like a physical hand. The maintenance channel beyond was a cramped catwalk running parallel to conduit stacks thick as cargo trunks, their surfaces sweating condensation and lit by warning strips that pulsed amber blue with each dampening cycle. Fans roared overhead. Somewhere deeper in the spine, a relay clanged out of rhythm. Sienna clipped his band to guest maintenance mode, crouched, and set the diagnostic wafer to handshake with node C17. The first attempt failed on authentication mismatch. He swore softly, swapped the cable orientation, and tried again. This time, the wafer chirped and filled with cascading telemetry. Reading drift at 0.86 and climbing in step pulses, he said over the noise. Not random decay. Kaylara braced one hand on the rail. Can you stabilize? Can I stabilize now? Yes. Can I prove tamper chain while doing it? Depends how sloppy your saboteur was. He moved down 3 meters to an access plate stamped Service, Authorized Biosign Only. Kaylara pressed her palm to the reader. Locks disengaged. He dropped to one knee, removed 6 bolts in sequence to avoid warping the plate, and lifted it free with the thermal wrench hook. A surge of hotter air blasted up, carrying metallic tang and ion bite. He turned his face, counted 2 breaths, then leaned in with the fiber optic. The lattice coupler inside looked wrong, in a way pretty systems only looked when someone wanted them to pass inspection. Fresh sealant over old mounts. Calibration tags correctly formatted, but arranged in a pattern no field tech would use under real-time pressure. Too neat. Too periodic. Whoever did this writes like an office, he said. Not a bay. He clipped the calibrator pen into the diagnostic port and projected packet history onto the catwalk wall. Timestamps scrolled, each one legal, each one offset by the same 21-second lag from sensor event to logged correction. Humans forgot to be consistent under stress. Algorithms did not. Kaylara leaned closer. Can that lag occur naturally? Only if 3 separate technicians all pause exactly 21 seconds before every fix across 6 shifts, while gravity support is drifting and nobody yells. So no. The channel lights snapped red for 1 pulse, then returned to amber. Warning tone. Coolant flow variance. Sienna's attention shifted instantly. Competence was triage, not ego. There. Primary issue now is thermal overshoot. If this coupler trips, node C17 dumps load into C19 and ring 3 gets a gravity hiccup big enough to start panic. What do you require? Manual bypass hold at valve cluster delta. 2 hands, full pressure, 90 seconds. She was already moving. He followed the conduit labels to a waist-high wheel assembly crusted with old heat lacquer. Kaylara planted both gauntleted hands on the lever and forced it down against hydraulic resistance that made the joint servos in her armor whine. Now, she said through clenched teeth. Sienna slid half his torso into the open access, braced boots against rail, and worked by touch and instrument readout. Step 1. Isolate false packet injector by pulling twin data ribbons from the mirrored port bank. Step 2. Hard reset lattice clock from local oscillator, so remote corrections could not spoof temporal order. Step 3. Reseat coupler, ring, and torque to spec with the thermal wrench while heat climbed high enough to sting through gloves. Step 4. Patch integrity. Check through the wafer and verify stabilizer phase return to linear. He counted aloud to anchor both of them. 20, 35, 50. Keep holding. 68. Kaylara's breath came rough but steady. 90 and 6. 5, 4, 3, 2. Release. She let the lever rise in controlled increments. The conduit hum dropped from ragged buzz to smooth harmonic, like a crowd settling after a near riot. On his wafer, drift fell from 0.88 to 0.49 and continued downward. Not fixed forever, but out of immediate danger. Sienna eased back onto the catwalk, sweat cooling under his collar despite the heat. He checked the packet log again and copied the tamper chain to 3 separate storage paths. Local wafer, his slate, and command archive under Kailera's seal. Physical evidence, duplicated, time-stamped, hard to disappear. Stabilizer holds for now, he said. You've got proof of falsified calibration cadence and forged correction pattern. Kailera released the valve cluster and flexed her hands once, pain visible and ignored. Can you testify to this under tribunal review? I can teach it to a board clerk with a headache. Yes. For a second, neither moved. The roar of fans filled the gap, along with the deep 8-second thrum that no longer spiked like a wound in his fillings. Kailera looked down at the conduit, then at him, and something in her expression shifted from command assessment to recognition. Registry called you low social friction, she said. Their decomposition model was wrong. Models usually are when they skip the part where people care. She gave one firm nod. By the second maintenance cycle tonight, I will have legal prep assemble evidentiary chain from your copies and mine. REL will route it through joint tribunal so registry cannot bury it in medical audit. Good. And I want my work order updated from spouse fiction to emergency stabilizer specialist. That request is already in queue. He blinked. Since when? Since you told me not to sedate through event. A maintenance drone rounded the bend, scanned the open panel, and chirped, unauthorized sweat detected on thermal surfaces. Please hydrate before collapsing dramatically. Sienna stared at it. Do I look dramatic? You look carbon-based, it said. Outcome probabilities remain concerning. Kailera's tail flicked once, unmistakable this time. Hydrate, specialist. He recapped the access plate, tightened bolts, and accepted a water pouch from the drone while the conduit behind him ran stable and honest for the first time since he had arrived. Sienna wiped his mouth with the back of his glove, capped the pouch, and listened to the conduit hum settle into a clean mechanical purr that no longer scraped his nerves raw. The maintenance drone rolled away, muttering hydration reminders to itself like a disappointed nurse, and the catwalk felt suddenly too narrow for what had just happened. Heat shimmered off the conduit skin. Coolant sighed in the trench below. Kailera stood with both hands on the rail, head lowered, shoulders still squared by discipline, even while fatigue dragged at the edges. Back to the room, she said, voice roughened by exertion. You're shaking. So are you. Then we are aligned. They moved together down the graded run, boots ringing in alternating tempo. At the hatch, she keyed the lock, waited for him to clear the threshold first, and sealed the planning room behind them. The sound baffler kicked in with its soft, tooth-aching hum, cutting the annex roar to a distant storm. Inside that cocoon, silence became intimate in a way neither of them seemed prepared for. Sienna laid the diagnostic wafer on the table and began a clean chain of custody sequence by reflex. File hash verification. Triple timestamp. Witness field open. He rotated the screen toward her. Touch here for command witness, he said. Kailera stepped close enough that cedar and metal and skin warmth replaced coolant stink in his lungs. She pressed her thumb to the witness field. The tremor in her hand had faded, but not vanished. Done. He duplicated the tamper packets to tribunal route, command archive, and his personal dead man cache, then held up the wafer. 3 copies confirmed. If someone wipes 1, 2 survive. If someone wipes 2, the 3rd auto-publishes to civilian engineering boards. Her ears angled forward. You built a dead man clause into your toolkit. I build dead man clauses into breakfast. A low sound left her chest. Not laughter this time, closer to acknowledgement. She moved around the table and sat on the crash couch with careful economy, as if every joint needed permission. The med vial remained where she had left it, one pale drop of surrender in glass. She did not reach for it. Sienna finished the last signature and flexed his left hand until the knuckles popped. Adrenaline was draining now, leaving fine tremors and a hollow ache in his thigh scar. He hated the crash phase more than the emergency itself. In emergencies, choices were clear. Kailara watched him with that unblinking command focus that made most people confess things they had not done. You did not hesitate in the channel. I hesitated twice, he said. I just did it internally. You trusted me to hold Delta under full hydraulic load while you exposed your torso to a hot coupler. I trusted your grip more than the station's governance model. That earned him the ghost of a smile. There and gone. She looked at his wristband, then at his face. I am required to ask before Tiger Protocol contact, may I mark reciprocal trust? He frowned, caught off guard by the formal phrasing. Mark how? Forehead to wrist, no ownership claim. Mutual duty acknowledgement. Witnessed only by us unless you request record. He held still for a beat, parsing layers, cultural meaning, power optics, legal implications. Underlying all of it was the simpler truth that she had asked. On Kiera's Gate, asking was rare currency. Off record, he said quietly. And yes. Kailara rose in one smooth motion that cost her more than she let show. She stepped into his space, paused until he nodded once, then bowed her head and pressed her forehead to the inside of his wrist, just above the transfer band. Her fur was warm. The contact lasted 2 breaths, no more, but the room felt altered when she stepped back, as if a line had been drawn in clear ink. Witnessed, she said. Sienna swallowed against a sudden tightness in his throat that had nothing to do with fear. He cleared it with a dry joke because that was what he had. My paperwork keeps getting stranger. Your paperwork just became harder to weaponize. He nodded, then opened his slate and pulled up a file tree he had not shared with Command in years. Murat belt, drift analyses, convoy repair logs, sealed casualty simulations, and the war diary segments he had locked behind private keys. He selected a subset, encrypted it, and pushed it to her terminal. Read-only access, he said. You get the models, not the ghosts. Her eyes widened a fraction at the file count. This includes pre-Accord combat architecture. It includes whatever keeps rings from turning into debris fields. Kailara touched the transfer icon and accepted. Then reciprocity. She keyed her command bracelet and transmitted a token to his band. New permissions bloomed in amber text. Arc Corps Maint Authority. Temporary command sponsorship. Cadet Ward Access Level Beta. Sienna stared at the last line. Ward access? If you are tied to me in registry systems, you are tied to my obligations. I do not hide obligations. He looked up. That's either very generous or very strategic. Both. The trade-offs are non-trivial. By 04:52 station time, the annex had settled into late shift rhythm, fan steady, foot traffic sparse, the kind of brittle calm that made mechanics suspicious. Sienna copied the evidence bundle onto a physical crystal shard from the emergency locker, sealed it in a tamper envelope, and logged it with both signatures. Physical evidence, no network dependency. Old school habits survived because they worked. Kailara crossed to the door panel. I am calling Rel through a secure clerk line. She can docket this directly to Joint Tribunal before registry realizes we have full chain. Do it, She opened the channel. Rel appeared on the wall screen, face washed pale by office light, antlered temples casting thin shadows over tired eyes. She took in Sienna, Kaylara, the evidence envelope, and went all business. "Status," she said. "Tamper chain confirmed at C17, Kaylara replied. "Packet lag fixed at 21 seconds repeating. Evidence hashed and triplicated." Sienna held up the sealed envelope to camera. "Physical copy in hand. Needs neutral vault within 10 minutes. Rel nodded once. "Send digital now. Dispatch runner drone to Tribunal Intake Chute 3. I will pre-register under emergency civilian safety statute so registry cannot stall on technicality." "Outcome?" Sienna asked. "Do we get hearing priority or a polite delay?" "You get a hearing," Rel said. "Priority depends on whether someone creates fresh instability to justify procedural diversion." The line crackled with a surge. Behind Rel, lights flickered from white to amber and back. Her expression changed. Not panic. Calculation under stress. "That was a dock grid transfer spike," she said. "Scheduled blackout window starts in 8 minutes. Registry just filed an emergency petition for command competency review tied to your medical profile, General." Kaylara's jaw hardened. "On what trigger?" "Arc core variance alarm from node C19. Sienna straightened so fast his chair scraped. "C19. We stabilized C17. C19 should be carrying normal share." Rel's fingers flew over her terminal. "Telemetry feed shows rapid oscillation in Ring 3 support corridor. Either your fix failed, or someone injected a secondary fault." Kaylara leaned toward the screen. "Can you lock registry out of live telemetry editing?" "No. I can mirror feeds to Tribunal and Civilian Safety Board, but command systems still trust registry timestamps." Sienna felt the station map redraw itself in his head. C19 sat downstream of the coupler they had just reset. If someone had seeded a second falsified packet path, blackout conditions would hide it in power noise long enough to trigger alarms and political seizure. Structural injustice wearing a technician's mask. "Rel," he said, "send the physical envelope now and confirm receipt back to this room. No detours. Already routed." She glanced aside as if listening to an earpiece. "Runner drone launched. I'll ping on delivery." "Then stay alive," Kaylara said. Rel gave a clipped nod and killed the call. The room's overhead lights shifted to pre-blackout amber. Somewhere in the annex, a klaxon chirped, once, twice, then settled into standby pulse. Sienna grabbed his tool satchel. Kaylara was already sealing her gorget and lifting her helmet. Pain or no pain, commands snapping back into place like armor plates. "Options," she said. 3, he answered. 1. We trust telemetry and wait, then lose initiative. 2. We remote in and pray signal integrity through blackout noise. 3. We go physically to C19 relay spine and hard isolate packet injection before variance crosses panic threshold. 3. Agreed. She keyed the door and they stepped into a corridor that had transformed in 30 seconds. Emergency strips burned low and red along the floor. Bulkhead shutters stood half ready to drop. Maintenance crews hustled with carts, eyes wide, pretending not to stare at the general moving at speed with an outsider tech at her shoulder. A squad of compliance drones rose from ceiling docks ahead, projecting registry blue sigils in crisp, geometric halos. "Attention," one intoned. "By petition of Registry Comptroller Office, General Kaylara Voss is ordered to present for immediate competency review. Associated civilian asset Sienna Nguyen is restricted from infrastructure zones pending legal clarification." Kaylara did not slow. "Override. Command emergency code Voss Prime Talon 4. "Code conflict," the drone replied. Registry priority. Sienna cut in, lifting his wafer toward the lead drone's scanner. Civilian safety statute override attached to active stabilizer repair. Denial creates documented negligence trail. You want your serial numbers in that trail? The drone paused, processors whirring audibly. Bureaucratic machine logic met liability language and hesitated. Kalara used the gap with surgical precision, stepping into the projector arc so her rank sigils filled its sensor frame. "Record this," she said, voice dropping into courtroom clarity. "I am proceeding to prevent imminent life support failure. Any unit obstructing route is in violation of Accord 17, Section Command Duty under Civilian Hazard. Comply." The drones recalculated. One after another, their halos shifted from registry blue to neutral white. "Route compliance granted," the lead unit said. "Movement logged." They passed through before the system could change its mind. At the next junction, the deck shuddered under their boots, a short lateral twitch that made conduit clamps rattle overhead. Not catastrophic, but wrong. Workers grabbed rails. A cargo tote drifted 2 centimeters before maglocks caught and slammed it down. Sienna checked his wafer on the run. C-19 variants climbed in jagged steps. 0.31, 0.44, 0.52. Too fast for natural drift. "Secondary injectors active," he said. "Whoever planted this timed it to blackout handoff." Kalara hit her comm. "Annex Control, this is Voss. Seal non-essential traffic from Ring 3 maintenance corridors. Keep med teams on standby. No public alarm broadcast yet." A strained voice answered. "Control copies. Shutters cycling now." They reached the service ladder to relay spine access. The hatch refused first input, then opened when Kalara slammed her command bracelet against the reader hard enough to dent skin. She dropped down the ladder first, quick despite the resonance pain he could see in the tightness around her eyes. Halfway down, she looked up. "Nguyen," she called, clipped and steady. "You said direct answers in both. Give me one now. Can you stop this before the ring goes unstable?" He descended after her, tool satchel banging his hip, heat rising from the shaft like breath from a furnace. "Yes," he said, "if the system stops arguing long enough to let me work." They hit the bottom deck together and ran into the dark. The dark at the bottom of the relay spine was not empty. It was crowded with heat, with fan roar, with red standby strips that painted every conduit like a fresh wound in metal. Sienna landed hard, caught the rail, and felt the deck vibrate in uneven pulses through his boots. C-19 variants flashed on his wafer in jagged climbs, each number a small act of violence against people trying to sleep 3 decks above. Kalara reached the access trunk first and yanked the service panel. "Reader is locked to registry maintenance keys." "Then we stop asking permission." He dropped to one knee, shoved the thermal wrench into the seam, and levered until the first latch snapped. The second held. He swore, reached into his satchel, and found the analog ring spanner he carried for luck and old ghosts. It fit the recessed emergency cam like it had been machined for this century after all. 1 turn, 2, and the panel gave with a cough of stale air. Inside, the relay bay glowed with diagnostic amber and 1 illegal blue pulse tucked behind a sanctioned line of couplers, subtle enough to pass a hurried inspection. Someone had added a ghost injector and painted its housing to match the conduit skin. Not a field patch. Office work again. "Found it," Sienna said. "Same handwriting." Kalara keyed her comm. "Annex Control, we have confirmed unauthorized hardware on C-19 relay spine. Mark this channel as evidentiary hot zone." Control answered with static around the words. "Marked. Tribunal mirror feed is live." He clipped the diagnostic wafer into the nearest legal port and watched packet flow split in two paths, one honest, one forged, and 21 seconds late. The pattern was so clean it made his teeth hurt. Kaylara, I need hard power isolation, not software. Manual knife switch on that red housing. She moved to it, braced, and looked back. When? On 3. 1, 2, 3. She slammed the switch down. The bay lights dropped to emergency crimson. Fans throttled low. The forged packet stream stuttered, then surged, trying to survive on residual charge. Sienna shoved both hands into the access cavity, found the injector mount, and ripped conductor tape free with his teeth. He cut the power lead with the thermal wrench's insulated jaw, pulled the data ribbon, and felt hot static crawl up his forearm before grounding straps took it away. Injector offline, he barked. Hold isolation. Variance numbers on the wafer paused at 0.61, hovered, then began a slow fall. Not safe yet. He reseated the legitimate coupler ring, ran a manual checksum, and sent the corrected clock sync through local oscillator only. It took 17 seconds that felt like a minute. Kaylara's voice stayed steady, but strain roughened the edges. How long? 8 more. Keep pressure. He counted out loud. She held. On 0, he nodded, and she eased the switch up by degrees. The relay took load without the jagged twitch. C19 dropped to 0.29 and kept descending. Sienna sat back on the grated floor, breath burning, gloves shaking now that urgency had somewhere to go. Ring 3 stabilizes. Kaylara keyed control again. Variance corrected. Confirm on your end. A different voice came through, clipped and fast. Ral. Confirmed. Intake, Chute 3 received physical envelope 2 minutes before blackout. I logged chain of custody under joint seal and mirrored both nodes to tribunal in real time. Registry cannot claim missing context. He closed his eyes for half a beat at that. Good. Don't let that envelope out of neutral vault. I am standing in front of it, Rel said. Tribunal convenes now. Report in person. By the time they climbed back to annex level, the blackout window had ended and the lights rose from red to white in tired stages, like the station was forcing itself awake. Workers lined the corridor edges to clear their path, pretending to check tools, slates, cuffs, anything but the two of them. At the first junction, the same squad of compliance drones hovered overhead. Their halos remained neutral white. Route remains compliant, the lead drone announced. Also, hydration remains advisable. Sienna looked up at it, sweat cold down his spine. You are alarmingly consistent. Consistency reduces litigation, it said. 3 minutes later, they entered Joint Tribunal Chamber 2, where law tried very hard to look like geometry. Black stone floor. Concentric light rings overhead. A central evidence dais under transparent shield. Counselors from command, registry, and civilian safety sat in tiered arcs, each with translation slates and expression discipline. Draxel stood at the registry position in immaculate blue, hands folded, posture untroubled enough to be insulting. Rel waited by the dais with the tamper envelope and the crystal shard in gloved hands. She met Sienna's eyes once and gave the slightest nod. Intact, on record, witnessed. Proceedings opened in formal cadence. Draxel spoke first, voice smooth as polished glass, as he called the alarms unfortunate coincidence, called Kaylara's actions emotional overreach, called Sienna an unvetted outsider operating beyond scope. He requested temporary transfer of ARC core governance to Registry Stabilization Authority until further review. Sienna listened, then stepped to the projection rail when called and did what he did best. He made the machine legible. He displayed C17 and C19 packet histories side by side, highlighted the repeating 21-second lag, overlaid legal correction windows, and zoomed to metadata signatures that traced through registry audit relays no field technician could access from a catwalk. He showed photos from his fiber optic snake, the painted injector housing, the fresh tool marks on vent screws that matched the scrape pattern he had noticed hours earlier in Gate 9's room. He submitted his wafer hash, Kilara's witness signature, Rel's vault receipt, and live telemetry from Annex Control showing variance drop coincident with physical hardware removal. Natural drift doesn't mimic a metronome, he said, voice plain, no theatrics. And emergency governance requests filed within 90 seconds of induced alarms are not caution. They're choreography. Silence held the chamber for 2 heartbeats. Then the civilian safety chair asked Draxil, "Can you produce a credible alternate source for the duplicated lag signature across 2 nodes?" Draxil's eyes flicked once toward his aides. The answer was a legal deflection that never arrived in full. Kilara stepped forward before he could recover, command authority in every angle of her body. Under Accord 17, Section Command Duty under Civilian Hazard, and pursuant to evidence now entered and mirrored, I execute immediate arrest of Registry Controller Draxil for infrastructure sabotage, abuse of emergency petition power, and attempted unlawful seizure of military governance. Security moved. No struggle, just shock calcifying into protocol as restraints locked around Draxil's wrists. His composure cracked only once, at the mouth, when the registry block did not rise to shield him. The tribunal recessed for exactly 19 minutes. When they returned, sentence was read in a voice that did not enjoy itself: rank erasure, permanent disbarment from governance offices, and exile assignment to outer ledger mines under monitored labor charter. Not death, not spectacle, irreversible removal. After sentencing, the chamber thinned fast. Systems disliked lingering at the site of accountability. Rel remained by the dais, shoulders finally dropping a fraction. "Outcome logged," she said to Sienna. "All submitted artifacts are now duplicated to Civilian Archive and Command Archive. Your dead man trigger can stand down." He keyed his slate and canceled the auto-publish countdown. Done. Rel looked from him to Kilara. "One unresolved file remains. Classified spouse designation." Kilara answered without looking away from Sienna. "Bring the conversion instrument." Rel produced a thin black tablet and set it between them. The document title read, "Strategic Marital Contract. Voluntary Operational Sunset Review at 12 months. Movement rights, legal protections, mutual veto on medical directives, explicit termination route, no property claims, no coerced cohabitation language, clean where the previous instrument had been predatory. Pulse check required for consent validity," Rel said quietly, and there was that same procedural kindness from Gate 9. Sienna set 2 fingers to his wristband and breathed once, twice, in for 4 and out. 76, steady. He signed. Kilara signed beside him, hand-controlled, no tremor this time. Rel witnessed and sealed it. "Filed," she said. "And Technician Nguyen, your status is now Emergency Stabilizer Specialist under Joint Command Civilian Charter. No detention hooks remain in your transit profile." He let out a breath he had been holding since docking. "That is the best sentence I've heard on this station." By 7:10 station time, they crossed to the cadet ward on Command Deck 5. It smelled like detergent, recycled air, and the warm chaos of too many breakfasts. 32 young faces turned when Kilara entered, then shifted to open curiosity at the human beside her with the tool satchel and the gray-striped jacket. No fear. No labor battalion transfer notices. A little tiger cadet with a chipped fang saluted Sienna so seriously it nearly broke him. At mid-morning, back in Annex stores, he checked every item against intake logs. Thermal wrench returned to his belt. Calibrator pen recased. Fiber optic snake cleaned and rehung. Conductor tape remainder logged to bay inventory. Diagnostic wafer cloned to tribunal archive and then locked in command evidence drawer under dual seal. Analog ring spanner back in pocket. Laminated photo re-sleeved and tucked behind his slate. Empty hydration pouches went to recycler. Nothing vanished into bureaucratic fog. Kilara handed the unopened sedative vial to MedIntake herself and signed a revised treatment plan in front of 2 witnesses, no registry intermediary. Structural pressure did not vanish in a day, but it lost one of its hidden levers. Near shift change, they returned to Gate 9, the same threshold where he had arrived cold and tagged as a contradiction. Now the corridor ran bright with civilian traffic. Refugee transfer families rolled crates through customs under normal gravity. Clerks argued over fees with ordinary irritation, not panic. Somewhere to the left, a loader complained that corridor tax for 6 meters was daylight theft, and a marshal replied with weary doctrine. The station, absurd and alive, kept moving. Kilara stopped beneath the black arch and looked at him in profile, command armor catching the light. You can still request reassignment. I know. No consequences. I know that too. He watched a maintenance team disappear down the spine toward ARC Core access, his new route clearance pulsing green on his band. He felt the old scars, the new contract, the weight of chosen obligations settling into place. I came here trying to survive a label, he said. I'm staying to define it. Kilara's ears angled forward, and this time she did smile, small and real. Then stand with me, Specialist. He took his position at her side as the gate opened for the next wave of arrivals. Not owned, not trapped, fully documented and fully there.